Well, I suppose we call that a win. It was about the maximum sentence that could possibly have been given, 5 years, given the scale of the offence. But the fact is that in 18 months' time, this violent criminal, somebody with 17 convictions in Sweden, in 18 months' time, he will be in this country.
UK Connors, Firaj Stark warning on Channel Crossing L. Before we dive into what could be Britain's next major security crisis, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this is the kind of political reality you won't hear discussed in polite Westminster circles. And UK Connors brings you exactly what the establishment would rather you didn't know. Right? Let's cut through the noise. Nigel Farage has just dropped an absolute bombshell on GB News, and the figures is revealed should have every British citizen sitting up and paying attention. We're talking about a staggering 1,000% increase in Palestinian small boat crossings to the UK this year. Not 100%, not 200%, 1,000%. Let that sink in for a moment whilst the rest of the political class pretends this isn't happening. Now, Farage didn't mince his words on this one, and frankly, why should he? The Reform UK leader laid it out plain as day during his evening broadcast, warning that Britain is staring down the barrel of what could become a catastrophic national security crisis. And here's the uncomfortable truth that'll have the Liberal commentariat clutching their pearls. We have absolutely no idea whether any of these young men crossing the channel have links to Hamas. None whatsoever. We're essentially playing Russian roulette with our borders, whilst the powers that be congratulate themselves on their compassion. The timing of this warning couldn't be more critical. As the world watches Donald Trump's peace plan unfold in the Middle East, as questions swirl about whether Hamas can truly be eradicated from Gaza, we're simultaneously witnessing an unprecedented surge of Palestinian nationals making the treacherous journey across the English Channel. The numbers don't lie, and they paint a picture that should concern anyone who takes national security seriously. The small boat crossings by Palestinians have quite literally gone through the roof this year, and yet where's the urgent cabinet meeting? Where's the emergency debate in Parliament? But it gets more interesting, doesn't it? Because this isn't just about small boats. Farage pointed out something the mainstream media would rather gloss over. Asylum claims from Palestinians in Britain have surged dramatically, and the government, bless them, is actually boasting about the increasing numbers of Palestinian students entering the country. One has to wonder whether Whitehall has completely lost the plot, or whether this is all part of some grand progressive experiment that the British public were never actually consulted about. Now, let's address the elephant in the room that makes everyone so desperately uncomfortable. Farage called this a difficult debate, and is absolutely right, but difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't have it. He stated something that's backed by data but considered utterly taboo in modern Britain. Certain types of crimes and offences are more prevalent among certain nationalities than others, and any serious government should be taking this into account when formulating immigration and security policy. That's not bigotry, that's basic risk assessment. It's what any competent security service would call common sense. But we've reached such a state of political correctness in this country that even stating observable facts is considered beyond the pale. Here's where the political establishment's cognitive dissonance becomes truly spectacular. On one hand, we have MPs like Labour's Sire Sultana Cordova waxing lyrical about how recognizing a Palestinian state is an important measure by Sir Keir Starmer, calling it evidence of Britain living up to our highest values on the global stage. On the other hand, we're supposed to pretend that mass unvetted migration from conflict zones presents absolutely no security concerns whatsoever. Pick a lane, for heaven's sake. Cordova and dozens of other MPs have been pushing hard for a family visa scheme specifically for Palestinians, citing the catastrophic situation in Gaza with over 65,000 deaths and the complete destruction of critical infrastructure. The letter to the Prime Minister pulls at the heartstrings, mentioning deaths of medics and the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding. And look, nobody with an ounce of humanity wants to see innocent people suffering. The situation in Gaza is undeniably tragic. But since when did compassion require the complete abandonment of security protocols and border controls? Back in June, 6 to 7 MPs signed a letter demanding that Britain open its doors to Palestinians, using the exact same language they deployed for Ukraine and Hong Kong. They want to reunite Palestinians with their loved ones in the UK until it's safe to return home. Noble sentiment, truly, but here's the rather glaring difference that nobody wants to acknowledge. The security profile of someone fleeing Putin's invasion of Ukraine is categorically different from someone fleeing a war zone where a designated terrorist organization has been embedded within the civilian population for nearly 2 decades. That's not controversial, that's just factual. The signatories came from across the political spectrum: Labour, the Greens, Liberal Democrats, the SNP, all singing from the same hymn sheet about British generosity and humanitarian values. And whilst those values are indeed important, They are clearly willing to overlook some rather significant security implications. One must ask, have any of these MPs actually consulted with MI5 about the potential risks? Have they spoken with counterterrorism experts about the challenges of vetting individuals from regions where Hamas has operated with impunity? Or is this another case of virtue signaling taking precedence over the safety of British citizens? What makes Farah's warning particularly potent is the context in which it arrives. We're not living in peaceful times. Terrorism remains a clear and present danger across Europe. We've seen attack after attack in recent years, and Britain has not been immune. Our intelligence services are already stretched thin monitoring existing threats, and now we're potentially adding thousands of unvetted individuals from a region synonymous with one of the world's most dangerous terrorist organizations. The Home Office can barely process the backlog of asylum claims we already have, so what on earth makes anyone think they're capable of properly vetting this new wave? The government's response to all this has been predictably anemic. Rather than addressing the security concerns head-on, rather than explaining what enhanced vetting procedures are in place, we get platitudes about compassion in Britain's proud humanitarian tradition. Well, here's a thought. Perhaps we can be compassionate and secure simultaneously. Perhaps we can help those genuinely fleeing persecution whilst also maintaining robust border controls and thorough security checks. Revolutionary concept, isn't it? What's particularly galling is a complete disconnect between what the political class considers acceptable and what the average British citizen thinks. Poll after poll shows that the public wants controlled immigration, wants proper border security, wants to know that those entering the country have been thoroughly vetted. But Westminster operates in its own bubble, where expressing these basic concerns gets you labeled as somehow morally deficient. The gap between the governors and the governed has never been wider, and issues like this are precisely why Reform UK has been gaining traction across the country. Farage isn't saying don't help anyone. He's saying be smart about it. He's saying recognize the risks. He's saying don't sacrifice British security on the altar of appearing virtuous to the international community. And frankly, it's a message that resonates because it's grounded in common sense rather than ideological purity. The British people aren't stupid. They can hold two thoughts in their heads simultaneously: sympathy for those suffering in Gaza and concern about who's entering their country. Why can't their representatives in Parliament manage the same? The numbers Farage cited should be a wake-up call. A 1,000% increase in any category of illegal immigration should trigger alarm bells across government. It should prompt immediate action, enhance security measures, increase resources for processing and vetting, and above all, honest communication with the public about what's happening and what's being done about it. Instead, we get silence from most quarters and accusations of scaremongering from others. It's simply not good enough. So here we are, Britain potentially sleepwalking into a security crisis whilst MPs pat themselves on the back for their compassion. Palestinian crossings skyrocket, asylum claims surge, student visas multiply, and anyone who dares question whether proper safeguards are in place gets shouted down as intolerant. Meanwhile, Farage is the one willing to state the obvious, willing to ask the uncomfortable questions, willing to put British security first even when it's politically inconvenient. That's precisely why establishment politicians find him so threatening. The establishment would have you believe there's no middle ground here, that you're either completely open borders or heartlessly cruel. But that's nonsense. We can be a compassionate nation that also takes security seriously. We can help those genuinely in need whilst maintaining robust vetting procedures. We can acknowledge the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza whilst also recognizing that Hamas's presence there creates legitimate security concerns. These positions aren't contradictory. They're complementary, and any serious government should be capable of walking that line. The question now is whether anyone in power is listening. Will the government address these security concerns properly or continue pretending they don't exist? Will Labour MPs demanding family visa schemes at least acknowledge the legitimate questions being raised about vetting and security? Or will we continue down this path of willful blindness until something terrible happens and everyone acts shocked? Because let's be brutally honest here. If there's a security incident involving someone who crossed on a small boat that we knew nothing about, then we meant well defense isn't going to cut it with the victims' families, is it? Farage has thrown down the gauntlet. The figures are stark. The concerns are legitimate, and the silence from most of the political establishment is deafening. This isn't about lacking compassion. It's about having the courage to prioritize British security while still offering help where we can do so safely. That's a debate we should be having. But it requires politicians to grow a spine and acknowledge uncomfortable realities, rather than hiding behind platitudes about British values. If this analysis has opened your eyes to what's really happening behind the scenes in British politics, then do yourself a favor and subscribe to UK Connors, because we're not stopping. There's far more to uncover, far more questions to ask, and we'll keep bringing you the political reality that others won't touch. This story isn't over, not by a long shot, and you'll want to be here when the next chapter unfolds.